who is the chair and commentator of our next session. I just want to, first of all, thank, we have, this session is, we're really crossing our fingers, the technology works. We have, some of our speakers are going to speak via Skype. Hopefully everything will go smoothly. It is only appropriate, obviously, in this type of conference to have speakers via Skype. And I just want to say one thing about the rest of the conference, because we're going to be moving from room to room, and I want to give you a sense of where we're heading. After this session, this goes on till about 12, well, maybe a little later. Oh, okay, there's a sign on the door right outside the room with sort of the flow chart of where we're headed today. So if you can't follow me, you can also look at it there. And Maytal can direct you there. But what we're going to do is, this session will go for about an hour and a half, and then we have a 15-minute ODR in action, which will be done, we will see via Skype, hopefully well. And then we break for lunch. We're going to have lunch set out here. It's going to be a light lunch, sandwiches, etc. And we head all together to the Hecht Museum, which is right by the auditorium we were at now. But we'll head as a group. We have a tour. It's a beautiful museum. I'm looking forward to it. And after that tour, we split into parallel sessions. One of the sessions is in our video conferencing room, okay? And Talia is not here, but she will be here at the end of the session. We will introduce you to her if you're interested, or come to me if you're interested in that session. I'll lead you there. And the other two sessions take place in the rooms we were at yesterday in the law school. Okay? After all that, we will go to another observatory in another building, but that's way ahead. So, and there we will continue. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Orna. Let's get going. We have a lot of great presentations. I'm very excited about this session, but we've got a lot to get through. So let me introduce in order all of the speakers that we're going to have. We're starting out with the technology first, just because it's likely to fall apart at some point. So our first presenter is going to be Zogby from the WIAM Palestinian Conflict Resolution Center in Bethlehem, and I'm going to introduce Dan Rainey to facilitate that segment in a second. After that, we're going to have a good friend of many people in this room, Sanjana Hatotua from infoshare.org, who is actually in Sri Lanka. He's going to talk to us a bit about what's going on there. Then we're going to have Modi Crystal from the Israeli-Palestinian Negotiating Partners. And then we're going to have Yardan Liel, who's the manager of IT for the Perez Center for Peace. And it's all going to wrap up with Carrie Menkel-Netto from Georgetown. So this is going to be a really good panel, I guarantee it. So let's start out by Dan. Why don't you come up and introduce Zogby?
Zogby, you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good, thank you. So the reason that we're doing this this way, there are a couple of reasons. One is that Zogby can't travel out of the West Bank to get here, so we had to do it by teleconference. The other is that he represents, with me and Jeff Oresti, who's also here, a couple of initiatives to use some technology in dispute resolution. And I'll just tell you that he is the director of the WIAM, which is the Palestinian Conflict Resolution Center in Bethlehem. They do a lot of different kinds of mediation. And I'll ask you, Zogby, if you don't mind, to start us off by simply giving a little background about the center and about your work, and then we can talk maybe a bit about some of the technology that we're thinking about using.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a great pleasure to be with you online, especially on this beautiful day. WIAM is a grassroots organization established in 1994. WIAM is an Arabic, a feminine word, means cordial relationship, harmony, agape. And when we started with WIAM, we started with Ministry of Reconciliation, mediation, that we address the conflicts that happen in our society. And since then, we become like the ultrasound, knowing what's going on in the society, finding ways to deal with conflicts, as well as to have programs for children, women, and youth, and family in general. When we talk about conflict resolution, we talk about conflicts at the corner and from different points. And so in order to empower the civil society, in order to have the transformation, we address the community as one, because we are a community-based society, and the family is a viable socio-economic unit. So we work with children under trauma coping and summer camps. Every Friday we have children club. Saturday we have youth club, and we have women club Thursday, and we walk and talk in issues of numbers, working for civil society, and to have a transformed society as a result of what's going on. We try all our best to keep diversity in unity. This is a nutshell without too much details.
And so while I was there visiting the other day, he was negotiating things as varied as a neighbor objecting to someone building a stone wall, and then some family conflict, and then doing training for mixed groups who were coming in to learn about how to do mediation. I would say, sort of his background, that what he does is very interesting to me because he merges a Western North American model of mediation with a traditional approach to conflict resolution very effectively. So we've been talking, Zaghi, I'll ask you to describe from your point of view why this is interesting to you. We've talked about doing a couple of things. One is introducing technology so that he can actually do mediation in places where he can't travel. And second, I work with Mediators Beyond Borders, and we're trying to set up a program so that we can have students from the United States and Israel and Palestine working online together, doing, I guess, what you would roughly call peace building as an umbrella. And so we're working on doing that. So Zaghi, I'll ask you to make some comments about why you're interested in that sort of technology.
Yes. I look at technology in the sense nowadays makes the globe go as a village and become smaller, and the communication better, and foster the relationship through a visual approach. And for us, online dispute resolution technology is something that we like to have and to exchange, because we have already been involved in conference calls and teaching some classes while in land, and classes abroad, could be in the northern part of the sphere or in the other parts of the Middle East. And it makes it easier when we are not able to travel for any reason, whether political or time-wise or economical and so on. So it helps us to continue either teaching or educating ourselves. It helps us in mediating conflicts, to be compassionate, to listen to others while you can see them while you are in your home, in your office, where you can give advice, when you can calm their fears, when you try to be, of course, compassionate listener, to listen by your heart. And of course, we are talking about this technique that helps us to go across borders, across religions, across nationalities. It will create, again, diversity and unity. We will celebrate differences, as well as we can say whatever we can say despite being here or there.
Okay. Now I know that you have to go. You're actually mediating, and you're busy today. So we're gonna ask a couple of questions if people have those, and then we're gonna let you drop off. So instead of holding questions to the end, if you have any questions for him, we can handle those now.
One question is about how do you think about introducing the cultural context into the code? If that's something that...
I don't know if you can hear the question, so I'll repeat it. The question is, how do you deal with introducing the cultural elements into the work that you do, the technology that we're using, et cetera? How do you manage the cultural issues when you're using technology?
Yes, I believe we are working in a situation where our work is more based on synergy, keeping the good tradition and opening up for the new approaches and new skills. So we have no problem, because we create in our staff, in our communities that we work with, in our approach, a synergical point of view based on respecting the cultural norms that we have already, open up to new technologies and techniques and skills, and create a marriage between these two trends. And I think whenever we are able to use the technology, everyone is happy with it. And whenever we cannot, we have the capacity, the capability to go on with our activity without a problem.
Okay. Any other questions? Looks like not. Any other final words then, Zaghi, about that you? This is a room full of conflict resolvers who are interested in technology, but they're based conflict resolvers, I think. Do you have any final comments you'd like to make to the room?
I commend this approach, and I wish that I am here, although this is a test about how can we use technology cross borders, because we would like to enhance this discipline and to empower it, especially it is needed more, and we see and have been able to visit different parts of the world where they talk about dispute resolution or ADR, alternative to dispute resolution through court. So in a way, I believe it is one of the best ways for learning and sharing, and of course, this will more light to this discipline and help us to be more in the interdisciplinary approach where we can mix different schools of thoughts, different theories, as well as learn from each other's practices.
There is actually one more question, very quickly.
Please.
I was wondering, since we just started seeing this piece of technology is not a way to resolve the conflict between the two houses, how the use of technology, especially with youth, in what Zoe's doing, is the way forward in the conflict solutions?
I get the question, if I can sort of summarize it, if I get it wrong, you can yell at me. Is it particularly important to use technology and blend that with conflict resolution for the youth as opposed to general audience because of the future, I guess is one way to say it.
About the feeling.
Yes?
Feeling is very important.
Feelings are very important, is being said in the room, which I agree with, obviously. But I think the question was also, is it really important more for youth or young people than for everyone else to be able to blend technology into what you're doing?
I believe for both, and especially nowadays, I see how many youth will come to the office or through their homes or kids who will use technology. And many times technology is used for negative things. But if it has this issue of learning and sharing, it will be very beneficial for the youth and for the new generations. And I see how kids are more sophisticated to accept and to learn from each other about this, especially when they use Facebook and other technological means. I agree with you when you talk about feelings. Sometimes you are not able to sense the feelings of others when you do it through technology, but at least when you have the photo and see a person look him or her in the eye and work with them in a more compassionate way, it will help. But let me tell you also, technology will not be the alternative. Could be for some time for some people, but technology will be used for the service of a human being, and not vice versa. So this is how I look at it, everything to be used for the service of a human being and to respond to their needs in a more creative, innovative way. And with technology, we are passing through this creativity and innovativity channel.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Zaghi. I appreciate you taking time with us today. And you can drop off or you can stay on and do any comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we wish you all the best. We'll let you go, and it is easier now. Take care.
All right, thank you very much, Zaghi. That was great. All right, let's go to our second panelist, our good friend Sanjana. Sanjana, are you on the line?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. Now, let me see if I can get your video up here. Oh, make a separate call to get the video? End the call and start it again? All right. So let me hang up here. Video call. Do we need to add in David?
No, David is not.
Oh, he wasn't there. Okay.
Hello?
All right, Sanjana.
One second.
Yeah.
Okay, here comes the video.
Yeah, he's from Sweden.
There he is, ladies and gentlemen. How handsome. I don't know if that's applause for Sanjana's appearance or if it's an applause that the technology works. So I think it's a mixture of both.
What about him?
I'm calling him. Stop embarrassing me.
All right, well, let's turn it over to you, Sanjana. You can do your presentation and tell me when you're ready for me to intervene and advance slides or whatever.
Thank you. Apologize for not being there. Or a very big hi to you. I didn't see you early on. The reason I couldn't have made it there is because of events that I'm hopeful many of you in the audience might be familiar with in Sri Lanka over the past 2 weeks. I was in fact supposed to be in Bonn in Germany for another event with the United Nations, which I also opted out of because work here has just become a bit hectic on account of these events that have defied the past 2 weeks. It's a real pleasure again to be speaking with you again. Colin, just to give me a heads up, how much of time do I have? Say 10 minutes, yeah?
Yeah, why don't we aim for 13?
13 minutes, you're precise. Just wanted to briefly maybe lay the terrain of the situation in Sri Lanka and also then ground it in the work that I've been doing for the past couple of years. As some of you may know, I have been interested in the use of technology for dispute resolution, but dispute resolution in the domain and the framework, what's called ethno-political conflict. So long drawn out conflict that's very violent, that's taken place over 3 decades in Sri Lanka. But essentially it's
Okay, wait, Sanjana, your audio is kicked out momentarily, hopefully not exacerbated by my desire to get the audience on screen. Is there a tricky cable here?
Yeah, this one. Ask him if he.
Okay, speak again.
where did you drop out?
Just give me back, rewind 15 seconds.
All right, I was about to suggest that I lost your video, but anyway. That the conflict in Sri Lanka over the past 3 decades has been on account of ethno-political circumstances on the ground. It's been a fairly violent situation. My entire life has been spent in violence, and in a sense that's often an interest in its transformation. So when I say I've been in ODR, online dispute resolution, I've always made the qualification that my interest and my experience is in conflict transformation, not in the domain of corporate commercial dispute resolution. So I've been the one lone voice, as it were, in what is a very august gathering of people around the world, being brought together by Ethan and his wonderful work, and also by you, Colin, who've been interested in the use of technology for these kinds of purposes, but in a sense a lone voice because I suppose I have been championing through the use of in very violent contexts to see how people can be brought together and conflicts transformed. So that's the broad framework, that's the foundation. For the past couple of years, and I feel I've been repetitive when I say this, I have been very interested in the use of mobile phones, and for this very simple reason. And Colin, if you might please put that image I sent earlier up on
it's
the
already
screen.
up. Everyone should see it.
It's like a big pixelated on account of the latches. I hope that you see through that. This is research that came out about 3-4 weeks ago that buttresses really an argument I've been making ever since Melbourne 2004, which was my first outing in a sense of these ODR sessions that I've been held since annually, that mobile phones in my part of the world, but also increasingly now in both your part of the world, but also in the United States, is going to be a fundamental platform for ODR. And it is very interesting to see here that in Asia, and also Southeast Asia, which includes the Philippines and Thailand, that phones obviously
far outnumber the use of computers, or the ownership or access to computers more accurately. This is research done at what's called the BOP, which is called a pyramid. The bottom of pyramid is an economic term that encapsulates the group of people who are economically the most disempowered, the poorest, if you can call it that, in any society country. So the poorest of the poor seem to have ownership of and access to more phones than they have access to or use computers. This, in a sense, is obvious. This is no longer rocket science for many people. But what is phenomenally surprising here is to see the extent to which in some countries like India, but in also other countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, that phone usage, both mobile and fixed line usage and ownership, exceeds. And for many years, developmental economists and many people engaged in development have suggested that radio, in fact, is the best way to promote a message amongst these people, but it no longer seems to be the case, in a sense that there seems to be more absolute than radios. That really is interesting for this particular point. If you're talking about content transformation, radio is one way. There's very little way you can, in a sense, get audience participation or feedback. It is a broadcast medium, and broadcast by definition means finger point that broadcasts to a wider audience. Phones, as I don't need to tell you, are two-way devices. And if you're talking about, for example, the transformation of very violent, deep-rooted, deep-seated conflict, it just then becomes a very interesting way to engage a large number of people on issues that are of a national importance. And this is, quite frankly, the central tenet of what I have been proposing to many audiences along the years, that if you are going to talk about dispute resolution, you cannot delink that conversation from the use and growth of mobile phones in many of these areas, including now the United States. A statistic I used in Victoria, Canada last year was that Google itself was very surprised to see the number of people who were using their iPhones when it was launched in the United States to access the web and the net. And there was one ODR service provider last year who had already created an ODR application for the iPhone, which I think really is the way forward. I'll go with questions in terms of the framework, but I just want to leave you with what is a sense of what's happening on the ground here in Sri Lanka, maybe parallels to Israel as well, and its implications for technology. As I said earlier, and I hope that what I type on my Skype screen can be seen by the audience, I've been involved in an initiative that I founded, which 3 years ago was the first citizen journalism initiative. The URL is up on Twitter. It's www.groundnews.org. It is a citizen journalism initiative, and by citizen mean that people with no journalism background can write articles to the site that are then published. It sounds a very simple idea, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to get different ideas and have them contested in a public space. Why is this important? It's important because Sri Lanka for the past 3 or 4 years has been a country where there has not been the freedom of media and free. It's been regularly on the top 3 most dangerous countries for journalists to live and work in. And I think it's only second to Iraq and Darfur in Sudan. So it's been very, very dangerous for people to have an opinion that contests the government or that contests the LTTE, which is the terrorist organization, till very recently. There's no investigative journalism, and to just air your opinion is to risk violence against you. And so this initiative is recognized as a place where people can come and discuss ideas that contest the status quo. And so this has been the broad framework where I have been interested in using technology like blogs, like mobile phones, like SMS, to get people engaged, to talk about issues that the mainstream media cannot or will not cover. The second URL that you might see up on screen is something that we are going to launch, but this is with my work with the Peace Foundation. Some of you may have heard about an initiative called Ushahidi, which in Swahili, I think, means testament. It comes out of Kenya. It comes out of the violence of post-election violence in Kenya about 2 or 3 years ago. And Ushahidi was a way that several peace activists in the country, Kenya, got together to create a platform where people could SMS what was happening on the ground so that others could, and plot it on a map so that others could also get to know what's happening and respond accordingly. What we have done is we have leveraged this tool. This is a live web and play around with it if you want. And what we are trying to do now is to use this tool in peacekeeping training in Africa. We have now agreements with the Cairo Center for Peacekeeping in Cairo, obviously, and 2 other centers in Ghana, including the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Center. And what we're trying to do is work with the African Union to get future peacekeepers to use this tool, but also to suggest that technology can help in what they brought. And we are working with the United Nations on this, the Secretariat in New York. It's a 3-year process, and we are very excited to have this kind of tool because the Department of Peacekeeping Operations have their own tool, but it's nowhere near as sophisticated as this. And we're using mobile phones, we're using SMS, we're using a lot of these technologies that you and I take for granted a great deal. And this is the first time that, in a sense, these peacekeepers will have access to this kind of information that both gets information from the field and sends information back into the field. With regards to Sri Lanka, we have done a lot of work with mobile phones, but also with mobile video. We go out into the field and get citizens to talk about what they want to talk about, and then they put it up on YouTube. Our YouTube channel I just put up in a bit. It might be a bit difficult for you to follow because it's largely in the vernacular which is spoken in Sri Lanka, which is Sinhala and Tamil. I can put this up. But there are about 350 videos and viewed tens of thousands of times, so that YouTube is also becoming a very interesting platform for conflict transformation. Plus, of course, the use of Facebook. There are a number of interesting youth groups, like in Egypt, in the April 19th, or there's some April 7th or April 9th movement, I think it's called. Likewise, we're using Facebook in Sri Lanka, also conflict transformation. What's happening now, I'll just put it very briefly. 2 weeks ago, on May 18th, the President of Sri Lanka said, after the death of Prabhakaran, who was the leader of the LTTE, that the war in Sri Lanka was over. It is, in 3 decades, a significant victory for the government. There is contestation, and this is where it's at now, as to how many civilians were killed in the final weeks of the conflict. And because of this contestation, there was a special session at the Human Rights Council in Geneva last week, where countries like Israel were in favor of investigations into these allegations by the UN, despite interesting the fact is not cooperating with the civil investigation into allegations of war crimes during its conflict with Palestine about a year ago, led by Richard Goldstone, who's a very respected South African jurist that's ongoing at the moment. And what happened at the end was that the Human Rights Council session, the special session, the countries voted, obviously, and 29 countries voting for a resolution that was tabled at the last minute by Sri Lanka, and 12 countries voting against. What it basically was meant was that a number of like England, Canada, and the European Union countries it was a severe embarrassment for them because this special session was championed by them and it simply didn't work. So that is where we are now. There is an war. There are very serious questions about the number of civilian casualties. They range from 7,500 this year alone to upwards of 20,000. But again, there's contestation. We don't know how many. We do know how many have been lost in terms of soldiers, that's 6,621. We don't know how many LTT cadre have been lost, but essentially there's been a huge civilian loss of civilian life in the final few weeks and months of the conflict. And this is something that I am very personally moved by and want to get Sri Lankans to talk about, because I feel that truth and reconciliation needs to be based on investigation, the levels of violence that occurred in the final few weeks of the conflict.
Absolutely. Sanjay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up. Just
yes,
because...
that is actually my wrap up, and
okay,
technology
great.
I feel will play a pivotal role, not just the work I've been doing, but also the ways in which satellite imagery, for example, and Google Maps and Google Earth can help in ascertaining through satellite topographical information what exactly happened on the ground, because none of us were witness, because it was a war without witness and nobody was allowed. So I hope technology will help bring peace, a real meaningful peace to Sri Lanka. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I know many people in the audience are itching to ask you questions, but we have other panelists here. And can you hang around, Sanjana, and listen to...
I can.
Okay, great. So why don't we move on to Moti? Would you like to come up and do the next? And do you have a presentation here? Is it loaded on this machine? Okay, great.
I decided today not to use a PowerPoint presentation because of the theme of the good morning, my name is Moti Crystal. I define myself, and here is a very comfortable audience. I'm an Israeli negotiator. Back in 2000, it was May 2000, during the negotiations leading to the Camp David summit, I served at the Prime Minister's office. We were outside Washington, D.C. in one of the preparatory meetings with the Palestinians, and at some point, Chairman Arafat arrived to Washington, and instead of staying there at Bolling Air Force Base, I called a colleague of mine who was then working with Professor Roger Fisher, and I said to her, Sonia, you are in Boston, I'm in Washington, let's meet in New York to have a drink. She said, that's a good compromise. And we spent a very interesting evening where I actually share with her my frustration on the way the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation process proceeds. And I said, I wish we could have taken the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation teams just for a weekend to Cambridge to learn the very basic of negotiations, the very basic, even getting to yes, even the difference between moving from positions to interests. Because at that point, and not only at that point, even today, I think we'll mute Sri Lanka.
I think, yeah.
Just in order to allow him to feel a bit more comfortable.
There we go.
Good. And she said that's a very good idea. We did manage to convince Gilad Sher and Saib Arikat to schedule that meeting. It was supposed to be 2 weeks before the Camp David summit, but of course it was cancelled. This is the real reason for the failure of the Camp David process. We never gave up the idea, and in March 2001, after the collapse, the complete collapse of the Camp David peace process, the eruption of the violence, I asked one of my Israeli colleagues and 3 Palestinians, all 5 of us were at that peace process, Camp David, Taba, and we went 5 of us, and we spent a fascinating week at Cambridge with Roger Fisher and his staff in doing one thing that was never done until then, and I think since then. It was a process analysis of the Israeli-Palestinian negotiation. We didn't talk a word about substance. We just shared, through a very good facilitated process, what the Israelis did wrong and what we did well, and what the Palestinians did wrong and what they did well. And it brought a very fundamental understanding for all five of us who served in the government and have very strong links to political figures. We were all professionals, none of us politicians. This meeting, we called it the Cambridge Five, emerged today to a network of more than 90 Israelis and Palestinians who went through negotiation training together at Harvard and in Europe with only one thing in mind: give these professionals the same language of negotiation, dispute resolution. The network, it's called IPNP, Israeli-Palestinian Negotiating Partner. It is a network. It is not an organization. Even if you want to approach me after the session and said, we want to contribute money, we don't have any way, because we're not a non-profit, we are not an organization. We are what really makes the world moves today, a network. Very informal, very powerful, because these 90 individuals are, I would say, located today in Israel's top-level Ministry of Foreign Affairs, National Security Council, Israeli planning departments, IDF, and other intelligence organizations. On the Palestinian side, the Palestinians are much more advanced in terms of understanding the essence of negotiation process, because in Palestine there is a unit established by the PLO in 1996. It's called the NSU, the Negotiation Support Unit, which actually recruited throughout the years dozens of extremely talented Palestinians, lawyers, Arabs, not only Palestinians, and they work for the PLO, and they serve as the PLO negotiation department, something which Israel had only for 2 years. So on Palestinian side, there is a professional Palestinian negotiation support unit. On the Israeli side, unfortunately, no. All the NSU, the negotiation support units, all the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the senior level, president of a security establishment, all are people who went through this IPNP network. That's fine. It's online disaster. No, but Colin, stop your clock on.
No, you're not.
You really count seconds.
This is stoppage time. It's like a soccer game.
Yeah. On this, so today, and I really want to emphasize something, that this is not, we do not perceive the network as belong to what is known as the peace industry or peace tourism, because we definitely don't talk peace. The people who are coming to these trainings are not, are definitely don't belong to the Israeli left or Palestinian peace community. They are professional negotiators, people who serve in the governments. Sometimes we have 1, 2 media on each side, just in order to amplify the message. I can tell you that 3 of Israel's top journalists went through this, but you never heard about it. The idea, again, is to empower and to teach people the language of negotiations in order for them to be able to communicate and to look, when they meet on the formal negotiation team, they look to one another and say, hey, that was a position. Let's talk separately. What is the interest behind it? Or, do we have a ZOPA here? Oh, you don't have a partner, you only have WATNAs. Conversations that I took part when I met this Palestinian colleague of mine on the other side of the table. We went through some very interesting, intensive crisis situations during Operation Defense Shield. In the last year, during the Annapolis process, we took all the Israeli negotiation teams and the Palestinian negotiation teams for that training, and the level of intimacy in John Harvard Bar, in Harvard Square, really is something that you cannot achieve across the official negotiation table. How this is linked to online dispute resolution? It's fascinating because we do focus on the personal dimension. And through the digital sphere, you lose it. What we have developed is we developed throughout the years a certain, I would say, email protocols that I really asked my Palestinian colleagues whether I can share some of the emails, even without names, and they said we prefer no. For example, during the Operation Defense Shield, not Defense Shield, this Gaza war, cast-led, lead casts, unleaded fuel. During the Gaza war, one of the leading Palestinian members of this network sent a very harsh email saying that he is not interested in taking part in the activities anymore, and he actually withdrew his involvement, affiliation, whatever informal linkage. There were like 2-3 days of silence because no one answered. And then I thought, as the initiator, that I have the responsibility to provide with the Israeli official response. I sent a warm email, very respectful, saying that as an Israeli, so-and-so, as a Jew, I think so-and-so, as a recent father, I think so-and-so, that it is our responsibility to continue. And this opened a fascinating flow in English among the Palestinians member, which was very strong, very powerful in the message of, hey, we don't have the opportunity, we as our generation, talented, skillful, committed individuals, we don't have the luxury to give up. And when people ask me, why are you so optimistic in vis-a-vis the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I say because I don't communicate with the politicians, I talk with the professionals, I talk with the people who draft their emails, I talk with the people who draft their speeches, I talk with the people who draft the agreements. And these strata, very thin on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side, is very powerful, very committed. They won't say it out loud, but they will contribute all the professional resources to make this vision of two nation states living side by side to a reality. And I can tell you that from the last year Annapolis process, I'm not very brave to say it when Tzipi Livni is not in the room, but I think that I said it to her. The last year, we realized that one of the main obstacles for reaching an agreement is the lack of professional skills, which I can assure you that in this room exists to the full. Professionals just don't know how to negotiate the way people know in this room. They usually enter into positional bargaining. They completely disregard the issue of emotions, culture. Partisan perception is a dominant factor in across the official negotiation rooms. No one teaches them the power of, for example, acknowledgement. I always say that if we had a word in Hebrew which was the accurate translation of acknowledgement, we could have resolved the issue of the refugees. No, it's not hakara. Hakara is recognition. In Hebrew, hokara, there is. For us as negotiators, mediators, we have this great range of show appreciation, reflect acknowledgement, recognize. In Hebrew, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
In Arabic it's easier to say.
In Arabic, there are some other words, which is a completely different word. There's several words for reconciliation, for peace, for mutual understanding, for respect. So, to conclude, Colin, I'm concluding before.
Good. You're good.
I really appreciate the acknowledge and recognize your words. The technology in political conflicts, unlike commercial and business conflict, technology should not be seen as a substitute to personal relationship. It should be, all our energies as mediators and people expert in online dispute resolution should be to think how we can recruit or turn technology to clarify personal connection, or to accelerate personal connections, and not replace personal linkage, personal connections with technology. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Yardan. And Sanjano, you're on mute, so don't worry about it. You can blow your nose all you like.
Well, it's a hard show to follow, so I'll try. I'll do my best. My name is Yardan. I'm the manager of the IT Peace Projects Department of the Paris Center for Peace, and I'm talking on behalf of Dr. Ron Kundak, who's the Director General and couldn't be here today. I'll give you just a brief background of the context of how we use, what is the context of us using IT in peace building. The Paris Center for Peace was established in 1996 by Shimon Peres as a non-profit, non-partisan, non-governmental organization. The political context is known very well. Rabin was assassinated, Peres became interim prime minister, and 96 lost the elections to the right-wing government of Netanyahu, which we are we know well again. And the idea was to establish an organization that will work in parallel to the political process, focusing on the grassroots, on the civil societies of both societies, Israeli and Palestinian. The aim of establishing the center was to further the vision where the people of the Middle East region work together to build peace through socioeconomic cooperation, development, and people-to-people interaction. And the mission is to build an infrastructure of peace and reconciliation by and for the people of the Middle East. Now I'll give you just a few statistics so you have a picture of what we do in the Paris Center. We have a range of activities on a regular basis undertaken through 8 different departments of the Paris Center for Peace. So here are a few examples. We have over 55,000 Israeli and Palestinian children and youth participating and have participated in peace education programs. Over 2,500 youth annually participate in sports activities in mixed Israeli-Palestinian teams. We have hundreds of Israeli and Palestinian business people cooperating to advance win-win outcomes. Over 1,500 referrals for treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli hospitals. Over 5,000 Palestinian children who cannot be treated in Palestinian medical systems have undergone treatment after these referrals. Israeli, Palestinian, Jordanian, and Egyptian agricultural experts are working together to enhance crop management, environmental protection, water quality. And regular meetings and training workshops are held for hundreds of key Israeli and Palestinian community figures, including young political leaders, mental health professionals, journalists, students, and so on. Now, one of the pillars of the Paris Center for Peace is nurturing a culture of peace in the region's youth. And the department that we work in is based on that pillar. And there's no doubt that IT is an incredible tool while working with youth, for 2 main reasons. First of all, this is the language that children and youth understand. In Palestine, you may not have computers and internet accessibility in every home, not even in every school, but it's still accessible. Palestinian youth know the computer, know the internet, are very well oriented. Of course, Israeli youth are the same. A second major reason is that today the emotional and the physical barriers are so immense between these youths. If I, as a child, used to go with family to eat a good meal in East Jerusalem, or even the Green Line was a little bit fuzzy and vague and you can go and buy some good potted plants, this is something that doesn't happen today. And the children are completely separated. And the physical barriers where Palestinians cannot enter Israel without an army permit, and Israelis are not allowed into the West Bank. The emotional barriers, fear, stereotypes, the bad images that we receive of the other through the media. All of these reasons make IT an incredible tool to work with youth. If I sit in my own community, in my computer center, with my teacher, I feel much safer to be able to correspond with a Palestinian or Israeli child than slowly, gradually getting to know each other in this safe environment through different activities, which I'll give you 2 short examples of. At the end of the day, we get nudged, and I completely agree with Moti that this doesn't come instead of the face-to-face encounters, because we get nudged by these children saying, okay, lovely, we got the point, now we're ready to meet face-to-face. So I'll give you 2 short examples of some of the activities we do in the department. One of the examples is the Peace Computer Centers program. We establish peace computer centers in the West Bank. We had one in Gaza. Unfortunately, my specific department is no longer able to work in Gaza, so we have computer centers established in the West Bank. This is not only capacity building for the Palestinian schools in which we establish the classrooms or the Palestinian NGOs, it's also capacity building for local Palestinian companies, the renovation, the furniture, and the computers, the hardware that's being purchased. Following that, we've connected these classrooms through a virtual online educational curriculum developed by us at the Paris Center for Peace with Israeli schools, pre-existing computer labs. Today we have 14 different communities, Palestinian and Israeli, within this program. The children have been communicating with each other through a tailor-made website that we've established for the program since November. Their educators have been going through joint training, joint development of the program since September. And I'll give you an example of the change that such a project can make. We, as I said, developed the curriculum, and we had a full lesson plan for the full academic year, and we felt comfortable with what was going on. And then December we had the last war in Gaza break out, and we knew that this war could be the end of such a program. The major reason is that as much as the Israeli groups were asking us how the Palestinians are coping with the war, it was much easier for them to keep on business as usual, keep on with this dialogue. I think a major reason for that is what this specific war, unlike the war in Lebanon, the Israeli and the international media was not allowed into Gaza. The pictures that the Israeli youth saw of what was happening in Gaza were very clean. They didn't really see what was going on. Unlike their Palestinian counterparts who saw the Arab media, which was full of pictures of the devastation in Gaza, but also uncensored pictures of a lot of death and so on. So if on the one hand we have a side that's willing to go on as business as usual, but on the other hand we have a side which is obviously not willing to, this could bring the end to a project. So we made a decision. It was pretty brave, and we made a decision. We said, okay, we have this website, how can we utilize it? And we created a forum for the children. And the forum was simply called Feelings. We're talking about 13, 14, 15-year-old children, and the forum was simply called Feelings. And there was a list of very simple rules. Everything has to be written in English so everyone can understand. Everything is legitimate as long as it is written in a respectable way. And to remember that we're here to talk about our feelings and emotions, but we're not here to put blame, because I cannot blame anyone in this program who is obviously not directly responsible for what's going on. And the first group that actually, picked up the responsibility and wrote was a Jewish group from the joint Arab-Jewish town of Ramle. And they wrote about their feelings and about their fear and about the fact that they're against war and against killing, but they keep hearing from the news and from government that if this isn't stopped, rockets will fall on their town in the center of Israel. And the second group that went in was the group from Hebron, a Palestinian group. Now this group's computer classroom that we established sits on the border of one of the Israeli hardcore settlements. And this is the atmosphere that the kids grow up in. And their educators decided, even though all the children speak reasonable English, Palestinian Israeli children speak very good English, and we use English as an equalizer. And anyway, the educators decided to translate what was written in the forum by the Israeli group, just so there are no misunderstandings. And they had a very difficult half hour convincing their very angry children that they're not lying to them. Why lying? Because there's absolutely no way that an Israeli child, Jewish child, is against the war, is fearful of anything. And after this half hour of convincing them that this is what's written, the Palestinian children went into the forum and wrote amazing things, such as, it is our job to show the politicians, the grown-ups, there's a different way. This project can change perceptions. And this is just an example of what such a project, utilizing IT, can enable, and what a change it can make in children's lives. And obviously, the rest of the 400 children, the moment they saw the way you can communicate, it just opened, the door of communicating in a respectable way. Now, this could not have happened if this were the first time that these children came to meet face to face. We were able to facilitate such a discussion, or the children were able to facilitate such a discussion, because their educators were involved in the program since September and involved with each other, and the children were involved since November. Today we're coming up to the end of the academic year. We've made small meetings for the children. Something we're unfortunately very good at is facilitating entry into Israel for Palestinians. And so the children have come in. At the end of the academic year, in 2 weeks from now, the children will be meeting for a day of just being together in a joint Palestinian-Israeli small village called Neve Shalom. So this is one example. A second example is the utilization of the computer game Peacemaker, which all of you have in your kits. Peacemaker was developed by an American-based company called Impact Games in America, nothing to do with the Paris Center. And about 18 months ago, they contacted us and said, listen, we have a very good game, and it's a tool, we're for profit, it's being sold pretty well on eBay. And but we want to start using this game not only within America or Europe, but within the societies that this game was developed for. And we were lucky enough that this came in together with the ability, with a grant, with the ability to purchase 100,000 copies of the game. And then on the day of the Annapolis Peace Summit, which was 27th of November of 07, we distributed 80,000 copies of the game through Israeli and Palestinian daily newspapers, with an ad saying, well, the politicians are there trying to do the job, how about you give it a go yourself. Now, if you haven't had the chance to put the game into your laptops and play around a little bit, this game is a strategic game that gives the player the opportunity to choose the part of the Israeli prime minister or the Palestinian president, and through different tools of, army tools, tanks, missiles, diplomatic tools, speeches, and so on, come to the end of the conflict, just to make sure you don't cross the lines. And we have created a curriculum, a lesson plan, making sure that we are staying within the boundaries of what we're allowed to do, making sure that we do not come to convince any child of anything. As I said, we're a non-political organization. But working with these children through their facilitators of the program, which are BA students, they have BAs in Middle East history and MAs in conflict resolution, working with these children about learning the values of respecting the other's narrative. I don't have to agree with it, but I need to respect the fact that he has one or she has one. Leadership, to stop sitting at home on the couch after dinner looking at the news and saying, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing and it's so easy and why isn't he doing it this way? No, this conflict is very, very complex and very not something which is easy to solve. And the feedbacks that we've been receiving from the children are exactly this, learning the difference between offensive and defensive tools, understanding that the tools that I have as Israeli Prime Minister are different than the tools that I have if I play the Palestinian president. The difference between a sustainable, independent state and the entity which is not yet independent and not yet recognized by most countries as an independent state. Not working from your gut, not working from emotion, but working from thinking ahead. Every act that I have has a reaction, and so on. So I think that it's pretty obvious from what I told you that I truly believe that IT can be an amazing tool to work when it comes to peace building, especially with youth, when it comes to your question, but especially with youth, whether it be younger or older children. And that's it. Thank you very much.
I need to get to my email here. Some of you will find this ironic since I'm about to talk about what's wrong with technology, and I'm going to use a tiny little bit of it. Noam, where are you? Where's Noam? I'm a part of the anti-PowerPoint crowd. But I'm about... Noam and I are organizing an anti-PowerPoint group, but I'm about to do one a little bit. Thank you. Okay, so for those of you who were there yesterday, you heard me comment quite skeptically about the uses of technology in some conflict resolution settings, where I think the goals of ADR are to promote flexibility, creativity, and as Chen reminded me, thinking outside of the box, not inside of the box. and tailoring solutions to parties' underlying needs. The trouble with some technology is that it tends to routinize, rigidify, and put into templates and formulas, resolutions and proposals. Having said that, what I want to do today is pick up on the themes that Orna introduced yesterday and the themes of this conference, and that is broadening our conceptions of what technology is and how it might be used for peace, which is my goal in life, to make peace. We'll see how successful we can be. So I want everyone, as a thought experiment, to sit here and think about all the transformations in technology that you can think of in human history. Whoops, just lost it. See, this is why. So the first and common uses of new technology: cave paintings, the printing press, and the Gutenberg Bible. Then we went into mass printing and the book as it circulated. High art and high culture. Talk a little bit about low culture or popular culture. Photography, radio, motion pictures, TV, and as we're talking about here, the computer net, the internet, the World Wide Web, Facebook, YouTube, all of those things. Have I left any out? So think about it. Other forms of telephone, duh, thank you. Thank you. This is supposed to be interactive, yes. I left out the telephone, very important. Actually, I have it later on, but so think about it. Every time there's been a transformation in technology. And then I want you to think about for a moment whether each move from one form of technology to another has changed in any way the way we think about things, and what uses have been made of the new technology. So how do you think we went from paintings to book to motion pictures to telephone to radio to TV? What uses did we make of these new technologies? Think about it for a moment. Did we use it for religious purposes? Did we use them for educational purposes, for business purposes, for science, for the creation of culture and knowledge? Well, some years ago at UCLA, where I taught for many years, I heard a brilliant paper done by a communications professor who pointed out that at every one of these stages of technological change, the most common use after the first uses was pornography. I kid you not. So the theme of my talk, I have several hopefully takeaway points for you to think about, is whether technology is used for the good or for the bad. And the truth is, technology is created by human beings. It's a tool. It is many tools, as we've just seen, and these tools can be used for good or for ill. We have focused thus far at this conference mostly on its good uses for peace, and I'm going to add some other forms of technology, actually some older forms of technology, that I think can be used for good. But sadly, I want to mention something we haven't spoken much about, and that is the use of technology for ill. I asked the question for us to think about, is media itself positive, negative, or merely neutral? Merely a tool in the hands of human beings who can be good and bad, peace-seeking or conflictual, demanding war or demanding peace, being nice to each other, being bad to each other. Tools I see them as the extension of our hands. The technology that we use have gotten more and more sophisticated, so now we can use our ears, our eyes, we can use all of our parts of our body and all of our senses, or just a few of them. But I belong to a group of people who think that media itself is in the hands of people. It doesn't necessarily create good or bad on its own. And here I just posted a couple of examples. So I'm a law professor and I'm a civil procedure professor in the United States. And one of the issues we talk about a lot in civil procedure is whether the concept of personal jurisdiction is transformed by the web or not. You don't all share our jurisdictional rules, but in the United States, unless someone does something in your state, you can't take control of them in a court. And we have many, many cases talking about whether simply opening up a web page in a state is enough activity in the state to create personal jurisdiction. And in the scholarship on personal jurisdiction in the United States, about half of the scholars say this is a really serious question, and the internet has transformed the notion of what it means to act inside of the state. And other people say this is no different than the railroad, than the car, I forgot the car, than any other form of technology in the last 100 years. All new forms of technology have challenged the notion of when the state can take control over an instrumentality, over a piece of technology, over an act of a human being to decide whether the court has control. So another thought experiment I leave you to think about is that, does the existence of the internet and our interfacing with people far away from us change legal concepts and any other concept that you might think about if you're a communications person? Or is this just another extension of very familiar ways in which we've had to take in and assimilate new technologies to things that we already have? And I would suggest the same is true of science, human communication, and whether we make peace or war. Human beings have made war as long as they've been on this earth, and they've also made peace as long as they've been on this earth. And with each transformation, I left out weapons. With each transformation of weapons, we've figured out new ways to hurt each other. And with each new form of technology, we have also reached new ways of human understanding and empathy across nationalities, across understandings, across religion, across borders. So all of these technologies can be used for good or ill. And you can think about your own favorites. So here, as an analytic academic, I picked up a little bit on what Orna suggested yesterday. Places where ADR, dispute resolution, and ODR, online, or I'm going to say here just technical dispute resolution, come together and where they're separate and where they create positive forces and where they create negative forces. And so I say to you once again, I'm a F2F ADR person. I'm a face-to-face mediator and arbitrator and negotiator. I teach all of that basic negotiation stuff we heard from Oti. So here you can fill into these boxes other things that you're familiar with, but I think it's important here to realize that the technologies we've been talking about in the last few days can be used either for positive good or to create more negativity. So the classic, and you can fill in other things, the classic form of face-to-face ADR in its purest form to create peace or dispute resolution, or here I prefer conflict resolution. We've been saying dispute resolution, that assumes a particular discrete moment in which there is a dispute between two parties or more than two parties. Conflict, I think, is more what we've been talking about here, especially with the intractable conflicts we've been talking about this morning, Sri Lanka, Israel-Palestine, many of the disputes in Africa, and many of the conflicts in many of our regions, the United States as well, were long, long conflicts. They consist of many internal disputes, many issues within the conflict, so I just prefer conflict to dispute. Then we have what I have heard lots of in the last couple of days, combined uses, hybrid uses of ADR and ODR. And that's one thing I think this conference has been wonderful at expressing. The field ODR came from ADR, but it is both bigger than and smaller than ADR. Dispute resolution, which began by assuming that people were face-to-face and talking directly to each other, was then taken, and we've heard, the templates that then went to the internet in mediation, arbitration, and negotiation formats. But we also have heard how ODR has been used in a whole variety of other settings. Conferencing, meetings, and in another field I work in, deliberative democracy, enabling large groups of people in communities to participate either through conversation, threaded conversations on the net, or voting procedures, such as a group that in the United States called America Speaks, which has run meetings of thousands of people. For those of you not familiar with it, following September 11th, after the World Trade Center came down, America Speaks facilitated a meeting of thousands of New Yorkers in the same room, face-to-face, thousands of people sitting at round tables, discussing in a deliberative way what kinds of uses the land should be put to, what messages the architect should get about restructuring the buildings. And America Speaks, using technology, using voting devices, and using facilitators, mediators in person, managed to create some consensus out of a lot of different and discordant discussions about what the goals ought to be for what ought to go on the land, building a new building and also building a memorial, and recognizing what had happened on September 11th. A model for democratic deliberation that can be used post-conflict as well as during conflict. So that was a mixed ADR, ODR example. Multiple parties, multiple issues, using technology, voting, those little voting panels, but also being face-to-face, and also permitting some people to participate by telephone. Another example of mixed ADR, ODR, I heard yesterday when I went to Leal's section. I have played with the Peacemaker game. and I have heard about its use in some classes in the United States as well as here. And I asked Leal about a group I've been working with here, and that is the Parents Circle, which is a group of Palestinian and Israeli families who have lost loved ones in the conflict. And they are a peace and reconciliation group too, about 500 families altogether. The survivors go and tell their personal narratives in very moving ways. So it is a face-to-face narrative form of conflict resolution. And as Leal told me, one of the interesting ways, again, of combining technology and face-to-face dispute resolution is the hope that after playing with the peacemaker game in classes where the students may not be able to meet with each other across borders, following playing with the game, some of the members of the Parents Circle would come in and actually tell their stories. The way Parents Circle works, they always work in teams. There's always one Israeli and one Palestinian together, so that their stories of loss are narrated together. So here I put that also in a mixed ADR, ODR category, combining technology with real world, real people stories. Then there are many of the stories we've heard and the illustrations we've seen in the last couple of days of ODR or the use of technology to create peace. And what I put in my little analytic cell here is my sort of other important take-home point. And that is for those of you who have not heard that in the United States, many of us have changed the A in alternative dispute resolution to appropriate dispute resolution, so that we would begin to be analytic and thoughtful about when we would use technology for dispute resolution and when we would stay with face-to-face forms of dispute resolution. So the skeptic that you heard yesterday, that's me, who prefers when I can not to use technology, recognizes that I've been using technology in much of my work. I am an ICANN arbitrator, so I have arbitrated online. I have used some of the interactive computer programs in my classes. I have done distance training, as I was explaining to Alberto yesterday. I have done training to Argentina from the State Department in the United States. So I can't say I've never used it. The question is, when is it appropriate? And we've heard many, many stories of that in the last couple of days. When there's high volume cases, and it makes no sense to bring thousands of people into a room, and I've worked on big mass class actions in the United States where technology has been used to formulate categories of claims so people can meet in similarly situated claim groups. Technology is appropriate for education, as we've all seen. We've been using it. We've been learning from each other through technology. Not all of that needs to be done in person, as we just saw demonstrated this morning, listening to our colleagues who couldn't be with us. And I'm about to say that when I go back in a couple of minutes to some of our own older forms of technology, films, TV shows, movies, both fictional and documentary, that we can create empathy sometimes through media, through technology, when we can't have face-to-face conversations. So it's important to think about, particularly here, when we find passage from one part of the country or land to another impossible through border checks and other impediments, that we may need technology to create empathy across border. And we've heard some of that conversation this morning. So although I began, as you heard yesterday, being somewhat skeptical, these are all, for me, situations in which the use of technology or online dispute resolution are appropriate, perhaps because they're all that's possible, or because they support and facilitate what we hope will be a stage project, as Leal has just described, where we begin in one medium and then we move on to another. Now, having said all those good things, and I'll come back, I have a couple of other good things to say, as I said to you, I think we have neglected at this meeting to focus on the negative. And that is the extent to which both face-to-face conflict can be very dangerous, violence, killing, hitting, hurting, speaking bad words. Those are all negative forms of conflict enactment that occur when people are in the same room. We can have the same thing with mixed ADR and ODR, and that is, as I've said earlier, the rigidification and the use of formulas and templates that can be used to control, to contain, to put disputes into the categories that fit into the boxes on all of those websites when you have to fill out information that do not permit the human being to express everything about his or her problem. That is a negative side of mixed ADR and ODR. And most importantly, I just want to make reference to something which actually is which is very well located here at Haifa. A few months ago, I was at a wonderful conference like this one on conflict resolution in media, and I learned from a professional of communications at Haifa, Gabriel Weiman, that there is, and he's written a wonderful book, scary book, called Terror on the Internet. I don't have every one of his statistics, but you might be interested to know that he's been tracking all of the sites, all the websites promoting terrorism and sharing information about how to commit terror acts and trying to encourage people to become suicide bombers and to engage in terror acts. When he began this work some time ago, there were 50 terror sites, and I believe he said when I talked to him in March, there are now over 5,000. He and some of you may be in the room, and his students keep up continuous tracking of these sites, and when he came, he's now at American University, living not far from me in Washington. When he came to Washington, he obviously has been consulting for the CIA, and we learned, much to our surprise, that he knows about a lot more terror sites than the CIA does. So I mention that to you because while we've been talking about the positive uses of technology, everyone here needs to think very soberly about the way in which our technology is not something we can control, and that we think of ourselves in this room as the good guys, trying to promote world peace, human understanding, and empathy. And who knows whether we are greater in number than those who are using the same technology to promote hate and to transmit information about how to create new weapons and new technologies and new ideologies to hurt us even more. So, I just want two other sort of general comments before I conclude. I think that where we can, I'm going to disagree with myself in a few moments, we need to use our technology to mediate our conflict, and that is to think about all the different media that we might use. And I just want to say, again, a few words about some media and technologies we haven't spoken of much in the last day and a half, and that is some more traditional ones. So as we've heard here today, through Leal and others, Internet cross-border communication with children and adults. Parent Circle has a website of adults speaking to each other from Palestine to Israel and back and forth. Also, some of it became quite testy and complicated during the Gaza war. But I read a wonderful children's book. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this book. Valerie Zanetti is a French woman who wrote a book called The Bottle in the Gaza Sea. And I have Peacemaker up here as an illustration of this too, promoting internet cross-border, cross-cultural conversation. In this wonderful children's book, an Israeli girl puts a little note in a bottle and sets it out to sea out there, very old-fashioned. And of course her hope is, and it happens, it's picked up in Gaza by a Palestinian boy. And the book is an epistolary novel about their email communication. So this is a fictitious wonderfully written novel about an internet conversation, taking up the oldest form. That's where the novel began, at least the English novel. The English novel began with letters, if you think back to some of the first novels. And this children's book, which I now give to everyone who might be interested in this dispute, very nicely shows about how children perhaps can use either Peacemaker or websites or other ways to talk to each other across borders. And because it's about just two very individual kids, they have all of the issues that kids do. So it humanizes them, and you see the ways in which they are similar, but you also see the ways in which they are different. And their lived experience of the conflict is quite different. And it's a wonderful, wonderful way to promote understanding in a non-face-to-face way. Then there is the old-fashioned form, the film. And there are some wonderful documentaries out there which are being used to educate and to create empathy. Now I put up here two examples that I've been working with lately. Some of you may be familiar with these. One of them is the Democratic Case for Israel, which is based on the book that Alan Dershowitz wrote in response to Jimmy Carter's book. For me, this is a negative example. I recently had the experience in the last few months of being a speaker in the LA Jewish Film Festival on panels about several of these films. And this film, in my view, doesn't have to be yours, is too one-sided. And I say in the United States it's a quite dangerous film because it's shown principally to audiences that already agree with it. So I don't think it's serving the purpose it was intended to do, which is to educate people to see Israel as the only legitimate democratic nation in the region. And I think the idea really is to increase the already enormous support for Israel in the American Jewish community and beyond the Jewish community. And potentially very dangerous, because for me it's an example of a one-sided form of communication, which again is another negative form of use of technology. Very vivid. Al Dershowitz is a very persuasive person, for those of you who've never seen him, and I think, for myself, it's dangerous. Watch it yourself and see what you think. Contrary is a documentary called Counterpoint, which is the story of the Parent Circle, and I think does a very good job of trying to be very balanced. In the sense, as I told you, that when the Parent Circle works and tells its narrative, there's always an Israeli and a Palestinian together. And the film goes back and forth. The film shows what life is like at a checkpoint and coming in and out. I think very well done. Now, fiction. Fiction is another way to create empathy and potentially to promote peace and goodwill without face-to-face communication in an educative way. And I'd mention here, for those of you who haven't seen it, the Israeli film, I don't know what it's called in Hebrew, Lemon Tree, which is quite wonderful and is being shown widely in the United States in discussion groups and film festivals. And it's a story of a Palestinian woman with a lemon tree right up against the wall. And I won't spoil it for you, but you should see it. Again, I think a film which tries to tell the story, a single story from inside two sides of two real people and how they experience it. Good Intentions, I don't know how many of you saw it, is another project of the Parent Circle. It was intended, it was shown, originally planned to be shown and then canceled when the Second Intifada began, a fictional TV show about two TV cooks, one Palestinian and one Israeli. And while they put on a cooking show together, the show, as we say in media analysis, opens out and shows what their lives are like. It was a fiction, but because it was suppressed during the Second Intifada, they then made a documentary called Making Good Intentions, which is a documentary about what happens when you try to make a film across the Palestinian-Israeli divide, and the wars and the politics prevent the show from being shown. So it's, again, another form of using technology to... it was shown. Oh, excellent, good. So it's another... Excellent. So it's another form. These are just some examples. Others of you I know work with NGO Search for Common Ground in Washington, did a similar project of doing a documentary to be shown on both sides, Palestine and Israel, about very concrete problems, the water problem, infrastructure, education, those sorts of things. I want to add quickly one other category to the film category, and that is what I would call intentionalist films. I don't know how many of you have seen another wonderful documentary called Promises, which was made by B.Z. Goldberg, who grew up half in the United States and half in Israel. In the year 2000-2001, he followed a group of Palestinian and Israeli kids on both sides. I call it an intentionalist film because as a mediation teacher, I show it in my classes for a number of reasons. One is, again, the idea of showing the reality of both sides through the eyes of different experiences. So there are five Israeli Jewish kids and 5 Palestinian kids, and they range the whole political spectrum. So it shows us not just two narratives, but multiple narratives within each side. I call it an intentionalist film because when B.Z. Goldberg started to film it, I think his intention was to do a documentary and just to show it. And by the end of the film, he's brought several of the children together. And so for me, it raises, for those of us that are mediators in the audience, it raises the question of the mediator as evaluator or facilitator. So he begins as a passive documentarist filmmaker, and then through the use of film, through the use of technology, brings the children together. That's not such a happy story either. Promises was nominated for the Academy Award. The children all went to Hollywood. They stood on the stage, and then the Second Intifada happened. And as I understand it, nobody's been speaking to each other since then. So, as I said, I will conclude. My take-home message here, or at least one of them, is to think about all that we've been listening to for the last day and a half, and to go back to how ADR was first constructed. No longer do I think of it as alternative dispute resolution, but what is appropriate dispute resolution or conflict resolution for the setting. Is it a concrete dispute or an ongoing conflict? What are the numbers? If we have volumes, as we know in eBay and in other situations, then maybe some form of routinized tech dispute resolution will be appropriate, multi-party. What kind of a dispute is it? Is it commercial, personal, relational, state? I call these modern disputes viral. What do we do when state boundaries don't make any sense? Do we use technology to speak to non-state institutions? Are there multiple issues or simple issues like monetization, cyber settle, all we need is a single bit of money to settle a case? Do we need tailored, creative, out-of-the-box solutions, or can we use routinized ones? Do we have proximity of the parties or distance? Do we need confidentiality and secrecy, or in deliberative democracy settings, do we want to use technology for transparency on the web so people can access and see what's happening? And then finally, what governing norms? We heard a lot yesterday about places in cyberspace where there are hopes that people can govern themselves, the eBay example of the community court, creating their own norms, or do we have certain kinds of disputes that require formal norms of the international legal regime or national or subnational legal regimes? So finally, I will just conclude and say, as I've been saying for the last too many minutes now, technology can be used for good and ill. It can be very creative, it can help us when we have mass disputes, and it can also be abused. And it's every bit as effective in creating more conflict as it is in reducing conflict. So we need to be careful about it. I've mentioned Gabrielle Wyman's book, Terror on the Internet. There's a popular novel out now, Anita Shreve's Testimony, which is based loosely on this scandal, for those of you who are aware of it in the United States, of the Duke rape, in which a moment of a sexual encounter in a private school dorm room winds up on the internet. And the novel very beautifully explores how that single moment on the internet changes the lives of many, many, many people by making a very private act public. So I said that's a counterexample to my basic argument. Here one could say the substance, the change in the technology, being able to put very private moments up publicly has actually changed the substance of the dispute. So I leave you with the thoughts of thinking about all we've learned about the creative uses of technology, to think about what are appropriate uses of technology, what are best uses of technology, how can we mix and hybridize forms of technology with old-fashioned forms of face-to-face dispute resolution. And ultimately, I have to conclude by saying, in my view, people are people. People use fire, people use ice, for good and for ill. And how you use technology depends on whether you are the kind of person who is optimistic and think the glass is half full and there will be peace, or whether you are pessimistic and think the glass will remain empty. It is in our hands to use that technology. I hope we will use it in the more positive forms. Thank you.
All right, now we're way over, so I know Orna's about ready to smack me. Okay, good, because I was about to say, very defensively, we started 15 minutes late, so... Sanjana, are you there? Can you hear us?
You're making assumptions.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You sound great. All right, so maybe we can just take a couple questions. I know that I'm supposed, as the panel coordinator, I'm supposed to process things. I'm going to condense that into one sentiment. Martin Luther King, a hero of the United States, said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. So my commentary is paraphrasing Martin Luther King. The arc of technological innovation is long, but I hope that it bends towards peace. And there are probably bad guys out there right now thinking about how they can use technology to do bad things. We are the counter to that group. So that is my one statement for consolidating everything we're talking about. So why don't we open it up to questions to any of the panelists here. Sanjana is online, so please. Yeah, do you have a question?
I would like to ask one question. Is it possible to distinguish between technical, scientific technology and human technology concerning solving problems, disputes, and other conflicts?
So let me rephrase it for Sanjana. Is it possible to distinguish between more functional technology, scientific technology, versus human technology, particularly...
What do they prefer?
Okay. Well, would the panel like to take that on, or? Sanjana, any comments?
I don't understand.
Well, I guess the question is, the the humanizing of technology, right? I think the scientific, let me just paraphrase your question and see if I got it right. The sense that technology can be used just for sort of essential analytic purposes, sort of data analysis, versus the kind of human, intermediating human relationships, right? And then which is preferable in the conflict resolution context? Well, I would say the human. It was interesting. There's a quote that I stumbled upon. The guy who invented the internet, I forget what his name is, Bob somebody or other, but he was actually the creator of the ARPANET. And he said, originally computers were conceived as analytic engines, but they're far more interesting as a way to intermediate human communication. And I think that is really a second-order use of technology. So I think the human technology is definitely the one that we as a group should be more interested in. Anyone else? Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
I was wondering, are there any Palestinians among the audience?
Are there any Palestinians among the audience? Yes, we have a single representative.
Israeli Palestinian.
Israeli Palestinian. Okay.
I meant Palestinians.
Palestinian, non-Israeli Palestinians. Okay. So we have one. So
I am Israeli Palestinian.
yes, Nancy.
Sanjana also.
Sanjana.
It was really striking the extent to which poor people around the world have the cell phones as opposed to and cell phones are individual communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the other television and computer, there's the potential for either individual communication or mass communication.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I wondered about was how is it possible to use cell phones, to really reach a mass of people?
That's a great question.
The technology itself limit the ability of those who can only afford that technology to have that kind of knowledge.
Yeah, so Sanjana, let me rephrase it. I think there was definitely a lot of interest in the slide, which is talking about the penetration of cell phone usage, particularly in Sri Lanka and the developing world writ large. But cell phones are very point-to-point technology, whereas a lot of other types of technology, like Carrie was speaking about, are mass technologies, where you make a movie and show it to millions and millions of people. And that also affects who can afford the cell phone. So how does the point-to-point aspect of cell phones affect its usage in these contexts?
And what's the affording is activism. You can have...
Right.
Yeah.
How does it affect activism using those tools? Sanjana?
Well, it's all right. While I'm getting feedback, I hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
It's not either or. I mean, peace building demands that a number of these tools are used in as many ways as possible and creatively. As the last speaker suggested, it is about human creativity and our potential for imagining solutions and not really the technology that really is holding us back from using these for purposes of peace building. The slide quite clearly demonstrates that, as I said about 4 or 5 years ago, but is inescapable today, that people, even at the lowest economic tiers of all of these countries, either own or have access to a mobile phone. In fact, what is surprising is that it is even more in some countries than a radio, which many feel is far more cheaper to own and maintain because it just runs on batteries. For me, this is really interesting because it suggests that we can have really interesting social conversations on the lines of what has been suggested is occurring in the United States in these countries for very little or no money whatsoever. And it is also complementing what is suggested by the interlocutor when she said that you could play films to hundreds or thousands of people. Yes, you can do that, but I'm interested in what those hundreds of thousands of people then think about that film, and not just immediately after the film, but once they go back, talk with their families, neighbors, and peers. And mobile phones afford a very, very powerful way of eliciting that kind of feedback and carrying on social, political conversations with a diverse group of people around the country. There are a number of programs and technologies as well which do that. I won't go into it right now. Many of them come as open source software, for example, Frontline SMS or OSHA itself. So again, it's not the technology, but the prevalence and the ubiquity, in a sense, of mobile phones, even at the levels where you don't think that they would be so ubiquitous, I think really opens up the door for us just in the room that you are in, and in certainly where I am sitting at, to try and envision ways in which we use these devices more and more to complement other media and other mechanisms and processes as well.
Anyone else on the panel want to touch on that point? Okay, any other questions from the audience? Yes.
I guess it's a point with respect to the question regarding the neutrality of the media. One thing that is interesting with respect to use of technology, dispute resolution, and our current conflicts is that in part the conflicts are, this is not going to be anything, it's new to start here, the conflicts about identity. And technology is used currently to maintain and shape and reshape identity. It's clear with respect to film, the intention of this film or film in general, but also we see now on the internet what we may call identity groups. There is groups that otherwise would have been dispersed, coming together online and finding ways to reinforce each other, and what essentially thus far is neutral, because it happens on the side of those who want peace, but also on the side of those who really want to resist peace. Now, this is not just on the internet. We see mobiles, and we just read about the use of mobile phones. We know that in Israel, during the disengagement plan, mobile phones, and specifically texting, or text to multi-recipient, was used by those who opposed the disengagement in order to coordinate acts of resistance to the disengagement. So the question then becomes, not only is technology neutral or not, but to what extent are we sensitive to the identity building aspects of technology, and at least recognize it, harness it to our advantage or not, but at least recognize the identity element that goes on here, which then makes the resolution of the conflicts either more or less complex depending on our awareness of this.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more, Amnon, you know that. In some of the analysis of this, one of the categories I didn't get to was the way in which identity groups, as you've described them, have both assisted diaspora communities of all kinds from coalescing beyond borders. So again, beyond border communication can be empathy creating and cross-identity and cross-nationality and cross-religion. There are communication scholars now studying the opposite effects, which is that groups that are dispersed physically actually wind up being very unified through the web and through identity groups. I can't tell you how much, I see it every day in the United States where we are, in a less violent way, continuing the Palestinian-Israeli dispute in the United States as Palestinian Americans and Jewish Americans participate on panels like this, and in some respects, sometimes we're often far more extreme than anything I hear here, because the distance actually increases the desire for identification with, and the reluctance to do what Libni just described, compromise, because if you don't live here, it's much easier to stay more rigid about the position. So I just agree with you. On the other hand, I would say, so I think that's a danger of the uses of the technology to enhance identity groups and sometimes make them worse by unifying people. While other people call it community building, it also makes for intensified groups beyond borders. At the same time that some of this media also creates more complex identity. As an example, let me just tell you that, as some of you may know, the United States takes a census every 10 years. What you might not know is that those census categories have not been constant since they began to be taken. Sociologists will tell you every 10 years another identity group has argued, no, we need to be recognized. So the meaning of Hispanic, Latino has changed over time in the United States. Whether you are religious/American, a European/American, an African/American has changed. So the whole idea of identity is also one that is contested, and some of these media actually help people raise those issues. So in some places, identity is getting more complex, and I personally think that's a good thing as it causes a problem.
Thanks. I actually want to build on what Carrie said, and this is what we've noticed in the technology allows us to feel free with multiple identities. Because I'm Monty now, and tomorrow I'm Master Google 76, and at night I'm Double Money, whatever. And when you do this throughout times, it develops the skill that you're not only a Palestinian, you're also a Palestinian Israeli, you're also a Palestinian Israeli and negotiator. And in the field of conflict resolution, I think that that's a huge asset. Because when you start a negotiation process, you can always address or hook to one of the several identities that the other person feels free with.
Can I just add, while working with youth, we're all talking and we're adults and we're talking about identity is something that we take for granted. It's not to be taken for granted. For an Israeli youth to recognize the identity of a Palestinian just as a Palestinian is very serious. Vice versa, for a Palestinian to recognize the identity of an Israeli as an Israeli is also. So when we break it down to younger ages, multiple identities are not even relevant before their own specific or singular identity is being recognized. So.
All right, with that, please join me in thanking our panelists. All right, so we've got a quick demonstration prior to going down to the museum, right? So should we come and set this up here?